Well, hi, Dan. I know that your film that you wrote, Irena's Vow, is coming out April 15th and 16th. And I am so honored to be able to talk to you, find out your heart behind the film, what you're excited about, what it means to you. And I just so glad to get to know you. And a man of integrity and a talented writer. It's great to be able to talk to you.
Oh dear, thank you very much.
Oh, it's so great. So you told a remarkable story. Can you tell us how it started? Why did you tell this story? How did you find out about it?
Right. Somewhere I think around 1995, I was driving home from a business meeting. I lived in LA at the time, and I was listening to a show called Religion on the Line, which was a show that Dennis Prager used to have. He
Oh, yes.
used to have three clergymen on the show, and that night he dispensed with the usual format. Instead of three clergymen, he had Irene Gut Updike. And she began telling her story. And I was so captivated by it that as I pulled into my driveway, I then sat there for the next almost 3 hours listening to Irene tell her story. Just couldn't get out of the car, couldn't turn off the radio. The next day, I called the radio station and I said, "Hi, my name is Dan Gordan. I'm not a psychopath. I'm not a stalker. I'm actually a screenwriter, though those things are not mutually exclusive." Uh, And I said, I've got credits. You can look me up. And could you please pass my phone number on to Mrs. Updike because I'd like to see if I can't acquire her life story rights to try and do a motion picture based on it. And then about 3 or so hours later, I got a phone call with this delightful Polish accent at the end of it saying, "Hello, Hania, this is Irene." And that became the great love affair with Irene, who became like a second mother to me.
And only 3 hours later, it was clearly a divine appointment, wasn't it?
Well, and it turns out that she and I both had the same birthday. We were both born May 5th, so I take it that there was something intended here.
Oh my goodness. And you don't know his timing, why it took to the time that it did, but it was perfect, wasn't it?
Yeah, it always is.
Ah, now tell me the journey of it. I understand it was a play before it was a feature film.
Well, actually, it was a tortuous journey. It was a feature film before it was a play, before it was a feature film.
Oh,
I set it up as a deal with a company called Alliance Atlantis was the first development deal, and uh, that fell through, didn't happen. And the only time in my career, and I've been a card carrying professional writer for 57 years. I was
well,
put under contract to Universal when I was 20 years old. So
ah,
it was the first time in my 57-year career that I ever bought back a screenplay from a studio. I said to them, "I'll pay you 100 cents on the dollar of whatever you paid me. If you want interest, I'll pay you interest also. But I don't want this project to just die on a pile of scripts." And so I bought the project back. And I almost got it put together several times, and it always fell through, always fell through. And by that time, I had done a couple of plays. My roots were in the theater anyway, so I like.
mine too.
So I was working with two wonderful guys, John Stanisi and Tom Ryan, who were both actors and producers. They had a theater company called the Invictus Theater Company in New York, and we were doing a production of an adaptation of a movie of mine called Murder in the First as a stage play. And one night I said to the guys, I can pitch you a story which is better than Murder in the First. It's the best story you'll ever hear. And I pitched them this story, and they said, "Well, it's the best story we've ever heard." I said, "Well, let's make it happen as a play." So I wrote it as a play, and somewhere around 2008, I think, we had a wonderful angel named
Oh,
Stanley Rafe,
yes.
and he backed the off-Broadway production. And we opened off-Broadway, I think, 2009 at Baruch College, which is a very nice off-Broadway theater space. And then we got tremendous reviews. We were sold out every night. There was never an empty seat in the house. And a wonderful Broadway producer named Daryl Roth um, championed the play. She put together a group with the Nederlanders, and we transferred to the Walter Kerr Theater and opened on Broadway. And I thought, the reason I had done that, uh, the movie is called Irena's Vow, and Irene was a 20-year-old Polish Catholic girl in Poland during World War II when the war broke out. And she was studying to be a nurse, and she was on the Eastern Front where the Russians had invaded from the East and the Germans from the West. And her position was overrun. She was gang raped by Russian soldiers, beaten, left for dead. It took her almost a year to recuperate. Finally, she was given permission to return to the West. And there she was arrested by the Germans and made it into a forced laborer, an impressed laborer working for the German war effort. And she wound up serving as a waitress in the officers' mess. She had seen a horrible atrocity. A Gestapo officer had ripped a baby out of the mother's arms and then stomped the baby to death and then shot the mother. And the cruelty of it was wanting the mother to have the last thing that she saw would be her baby be killed. And she said, I saw it happen and there was nothing I could do. If I had made a sound or if I had tried to interfere, I would have been killed. She said, God doesn't ask you to do what's impossible, but he does ask you to do what's possible. So she said, that's when I made a vow that if it ever came into my hands to be able to save a life, I would do it. And so she made that vow. When she was working in the officers' mess, part of her duties were to supervise the Jews, 11 Jews who worked in the laundry, and she became friends with them. And she overheard the head of the Gestapo for that area say that they were going to liquidate the ghetto and kill every Jew in that area within X number of weeks. And she told her friends, you have to find a place to hide. They're going to kill all of you. And they said, Irene, you're such a baby. If we had a place to hide, we'd be hiding there. And we don't. So you hide us. And she said, well, where am I going to hide you? In my pockets? I mean, literally her room was a converted broom closet. And they said, well, if you can't hide us, in that case, we're dead. And she went back to the officer's mess, and the major was there waiting for her. And he said, pack your things, you're finished here. And she thought maybe he found out that she tried to warn the Jews, and she started stuttering and stammering. And he said, I don't need any dialogue on this. You're finished here. I've commandeered a villa on the edge of town. I'm not going to be living in bachelor officers' quarter. I need something more sumptuous, and I'm going to be entertaining a great deal. You're going to be my housekeeper. I'm going to give you a squad of soldiers, clean it top to bottom, have it ready for me to move in 10 days, because in 2 weeks, I give my first party for the Gestapo. So without hesitation, she went to the Jews and said, I found the perfect place to hide you. In the basement of the highest ranking German officer in Tarnopol, where no one will ever think to look. Well, of course, that's insane.
It's insane. Yeah.
But
it's so God.
Her faith in God was so perfect that she simply said, God will see us through this thing.
Yeah.
So she had made a vow to save those lives, and that's what propelled her. After I met her, she in her later life began speaking at high schools to tell young people about the Holocaust. And these were inner city kids who had no idea what she was talking about until she got there. And in the end, she had them eating out of the palm of her hand. And her great fear in life, toward the end of her life, she said, who will tell the children when I'm gone? And I said, you will, Irene. I'm going to see to that. It'll be a movie. It'll get made. And she was, watched it almost get made and fall through and almost get made and fall through. So when I saw the chance to maybe get it made as a play, I didn't hesitate. And I was workshopping the play at a little college in New England. And Irene was at the end of her life. She was in the hospital. She was dying.
Oh,
And I called her daughter up on the evening of the very first performance ever of the play. And I said, Jeannie, hold the phone up to your mom's ear. And I said, Irene, you hear that applause? It's for
oh,
you. And she passed away the next day or the day after that. So she knew the play was a reality, and that was my vow to her. And and now finally the movie's going to get made, and so for me, you know, it's more than just another gig or another movie or any of those things. It's fulfilling a vow that I made to someone who was very precious to me.
and you are fulfilling a vow you made based on a woman who fulfilled a vow that she
Yeah,
made. It's
absolutely.
just a beautiful legacy of being faithful to an impossible dream
Yeah,
and then watching God make it happen. That's incredible to me. It's just beautiful. And the timing of her being able to hear the applause from that play,
yeah.
that just, and now she's in heaven. She knows what you're doing. She knows the movie's coming out. It's just it's a beautiful inspirational story. Not only the story of her, but the story of you and your faithfulness and your willingness to just put everything aside and pass on the power of storytelling. You know, Ingmar Bergman, the great director, said facts go straight to the head, but stories go straight to the heart.
Hmm.
And that's what you're doing by telling this story. It,
And
it, it
I've written it now. The book just came out 2 weeks ago, and so I urge people that the movie will be in theaters April 15th and 16th. The book is available on Amazon, and of course, in a book you can do a lot more than you could do in a 2-hour movie. You can go into a bit more detail, but
yes.
you know, there's a permanence to books and to movies now too that there didn't used to be because of streaming and DVRs, so that you have hope that this both the book and the movie live on.
Well, and my next dream for you is to get an audio version of the book, so it could also be out on audio for
Yes, that would be
people.
lovely.
It's
Absolutely.
it's so great. Now, can you tell me, first of all, any changes between major changes between her real life story and your play, and then the play to the movie? Was it was it a pretty consistent story, or based on the different mediums? What did you have to do to that story?
I wanted both the movie and the play to be as close as possible to the experience of Irene telling her own story. Because as I say, I took her so many times to high schools, and she had written with a ghostwriter 2 different books with 2 different ghostwriters, and I never read either of the 2 books because I knew they were filtered through a ghostwriter, and I really wanted to tell the story as closely as possible to the experience of listening to Irene tell her story. And so that was how it was really framed in the play. You start with an older woman up in years who's addressing the audience as they are the high school children. And then she takes a few steps down the risers, and as she steps down, she lets down her hair and she transforms into the young girl. And we had a wonderful actress who could pull that off, Tova Feldscher, who's a Tony Award winning actress.
Oh, she's
I wanted,
amazing. Yes.
I wanted to do the same thing in the movie where we start with an older woman speaking and telling her story to the audience. And the director, movies are a director's medium.
Yeah.
The director didn't want to do that because she felt that it it damaged any suspense since you knew that she lived through the ordeal,
Ah.
which is true. And I thought I had a clever way around that, but at any rate, and I don't think she liked flashbacks anyway. So she made a valid choice of her own, which was to say, let's just tell the story and eliminate the older Irene who's telling the story. So that's a change from the play to the movie. I didn't make that change, but that is a change that's there. But the structure of the story itself is as close as I could possibly come to Irene telling you her own story.
Mm.
It's that sequence of events. And people say, well, what did you embellish? You must have embellished something. No, I didn't. As unbelievable as everything in this story is, and it's truly unbelievable.
Yeah, you don't have to make anything up, do you? It's
Yeah, no, there's no reason to embellish anything. It all happened.
fact is so much better than fiction anyway. You can't retell a better story than an amazing true story.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's so true. Did you change names? Did you change locations? Did you feel any need to protect anybody, or is it enough time that you can just lay it out?
No, I didn't. I didn't change names, locations, none of that.
Oh, that's
You know, the major was Major Rugemer. The head of the Gestapo was Rokita. The Jews who were in the basement have the names that they had. And actually, there was one interesting thing that happened during the Broadway play. The house manager came to me and said, there are two people here who would like to see you. They are the descendants of one of the people in the play. They're the grandchildren of one of the people in the play. I said, oh, I would love to see them, sure. And there's a character, there were a married couple named Thomas and Ida Bauer. So they said, we are, the grandchildren of Ida Bauer. And I said, oh my goodness, that's wonderful, that's fantastic. They said, well, we really have to correct a glaring mistake that's in the play. And I said, please, by all means. And they said, well, Thomas and Ida Bauer weren't husband and wife. They were cousins. But they thought they had a better chance of convincing Irene to hide them.
Oh my God.
They said they were a married couple.
Right.
So Irene actually never knew.
She didn't know.
She never knew they were cousins. And they pretended the whole time that they were a married couple. And then when the war ended, they, went off and made their lives and married other spouses and what have you. And I thought, well, should I change that or not? And I thought, no, because I'm really telling this based on Irene's memories, and this is the truth as she knew it.
That's right. And it is fascinating, but it doesn't change her story. No, that's really true. Now, you knew Irene personally. You got to know her so well. What stands out to you about her character, about who she is as a person?
She had the most perfect faith of anyone I've ever met. It was not dogmatic. It was not orthodox in any ways. It was very innocent, actually. It was a very personal relationship with God. And it was just a perfect faith that God was with her. And, I don't believe she ever had a crisis of faith. I think she had difficult decisions to make, but I don't believe her faith was ever shaken, ever. In spite of all the horrors that she saw, her faith in God
she went through herself. Yeah.
Her faith in God was unshakable. And the other thing which I will tell you, which is a very personal thing, my son of blessed memory, Zachy, my firstborn, was killed when he was 22 in a car accident.
Oh.
Brilliant kid who had just 6 months earlier graduated from Tisch School of the Arts at NYU, first in his class. He was a published author at 19. He had done his first feature at 20. No one had a brighter future than my son. And Irene was one of the first people to come and visit me.
Oh my goodness.
And a lot of very sweet, good friends came and tried to say things to comfort one. And one of the things I learned long ago is when someone loses a child, there is no comfort. There's nothing you can say that comforts anybody.
Words are empty.
And she hugged me and she said, Chanya, there is tragedy in life. And I thought, that's about the wisest thing I've ever heard. It's just, that's part of the deal. There is tragedy in life. And that's it.
And what can you do? Yeah.
And everybody has their own little bag of whatever they have to carry in life. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but nobody gets out of this clean. Everybody's got something. And and it's not an excuse to stop living, and it's not an excuse to turn bitter. And it is what it is, you know. Um, but I thought that was so loving and so wise to simply look me in the eyes and not say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, and I know how you feel," and no, no, no. It's
No.
just that's part of the deal.
Uh-huh. And she couldn't have said that if she hadn't have gone through it herself. She just knew the truth of it all.
Absolutely. You know, she after the war, she or after she had gotten saved, she saved all 12 of the Jews, and you know, I will tell you there was a baby that was conceived down there that she saved as well. And she joined a partisan unit, and she fell in love with the leader of the partisans. He was a guy named Jan, who I think was probably the great love of her life. And they were to be married. And on the day they were to be married, as she was putting on her wedding dress, she was told that he was killed in a German ambush. So she certainly knew in her own bones what tragedy was. And you know, and like I say, I thought it was, I think back on it, it was the most loving and compassionate and honest and wise thing she could have said.
Oh, I mean, I just can't believe that the fact that you're just not writing a good story, your life has been changed by this woman.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What would you say based on the end of the whole experience and all the versions and all the years and everything? How are you different?
You know, I never for a moment thought when I first wrote this, and I can tell you, both in writing the play and writing the movie, I used to have a ranch up in Colorado on the West Fork of the Dolores River, and I've never had a problem writing. Writing has always been very easy for me. But I approached this with great trepidation, and uh, I always wrote, and I still do, very disciplined. I start at the same time each day. I have a word minimum that I need to get out, and you know, this is my office. This is where I write, and it's a good writing environment. And I had the same thing then, but I thought I need to do something entirely different for this. So I went up to my ranch in Colorado, and it was wintertime, and the place was snowed in, and I had to, you know, I had a four-wheel and barely got in, and I got in a good supply of wood for the fireplace and had provisions. And I just stayed there and wrote that screenplay until it was done. And then when I did the play, I went back to the ranch and did the same thing. And and you know, totally isolated, so I could just write. And I wrote maybe 10 hours a day and
Ah,
wrote it with fever. And the whole experience of this journey, I never thought when I wrote that, when I was in that ranch house in Colorado, snowed in, I never imagined for a minute that I would ever live to see a time in which Jews would be hiding again from genocidal mass murderers, burning their way through their towns and villages, bent on massacring them for the crime of being Jews. But that's exactly what happened October 7th. And things which I thought of as academic, I now saw as very real. I just did a 7 hour documentary for TBN, three specials, three 1 hour specials, and four-part documentary on October 7th. I was in Israel for 6 weeks. I was at the site of the massacres. I was embedded with the Israeli army. Um, I was in the places where you could still smell the blood. You could still smell the char on the buildings. I know people who lost their whole families there, who were parents and children murdered, and not quickly and not prettily, not easily, and people whose family members are hostages to this day. And so things that I thought of as a story, today I look at and I go, no, that's as real as a heart attack. And maybe that was God's plan to delay this thing until now, because just as there was a Holocaust denial, there was almost immediately a denial that any of that happened. And today it's forgotten and denied. And in some circles, it's, oh, well, if it did happen, the Jews had it coming, which is even more devastating. So I think there was a reason that this thing was meant to come out when it's coming out.
Well, absolutely. And you just described that artists are prophets. Prophets either reflect what's going on in culture or project what's coming. And without you even realizing it, as a prophet that God used to warn our world, to remind our world, you've told this story in a way that not only you're different, but people who watch it are going to be different, Dan. You have done more than just written a great story. You have offered our world a reminder of how much we need God. We cannot live life on our own. There's evil in this world, and we've got to realize that and be wise about how to handle that. And I'm excited to have the movie come out. It is a powerful story. You've done an incredible job. And I just want to thank you for what you've done and to know that you've got more coming. You are a prophet that God is using in beautiful ways. And I am grateful to get a chance to talk to you. Thank you so, so much.
I will tell you, on this one, all I'm trying to do is faithfully render Irene's story the way she would tell it. And like I say, she asked me, "Who will tell the story when I'm gone?" And I said, "You will." And that really is what I was trying to do here, is to let Irene tell her story in her words, the way she told it, and both in the book and in the movie. So hopefully that will be the case for people who get to see it.
Absolutely. And you've done it well. And I'm so excited for you. So thank you for taking this time. I just hope that our listeners will go out of their way to see this story and be moved by it. Like you said, not just as of history, but as a reminder of who we are today as well.
And the power of goodness, the power of faith. You know,
That's it.
It's Irena's Vow. It'll be in the theaters April 15th and 16th, and the book is on Amazon.
Fabulous. And I want to see the play in more places as well. That doesn't have to stop either. So,
well, as they say, from your mouth to Daryl Roth's ear. So,
oh, thank you so much. It's great to meet you.
lovely to meet you too. Thank you. Thank you for having me.